Hello manga and anime lovers, I'm Branch1. You can call me Branch, and today I'm going to be talking about the penultimate episode of How to Become Ordinary, Season 2, Episode 11. And oh boy, everything happens on this episode. In fact, so much happens that the first half of the episode is basically irrelevant to talk about because it's all build up for the second half. And all the mystery that they build up in the first half is it's all answered. Everything gets answered in this episode. And as I suspected, I gotta hand it to me. Even though I didn't figure anything out, I sussed a lot of stuff out. All that stuff about the hospital, it mattered. It mattered. Everything mattered. The doctors mattered. The way they treated Koboto mattered. The way the nurse constantly looked at him really mattered. The way they were hesitant to let him do anything especially mattered. And you know what mattered even more? The hammer! The hammer mattered! The hammer, it's back. It returns for a brief cameo at the end of the episode. I knew that hammer was something. Even if it's not the exact same hammer, it's definitely related. Anyways, all seriousness, this is probably one of the most straightforward, clear-cut cases once you actually know the answer. Like a lot of the cases in the show are either a little bit convoluted, they're either very convoluted or they're so simple that you could have figured it out if you weren't so busy trying to make up a story in your head because you expected it to be more complicated. Whereas this final mystery is very much, I don't know, I guess thrown at you. I mean, even I understood that something was wrong with the hospital. I initially suspected that it was because of Koboto's mental states, but then I realized that something was kind of it was too straightforward. Not straightforward. It was too much for it to just be something slightly off about Koboto, and the fact that the nurse turned out to be the culprit this entire time is really puts everything into perspective. Of course, she was constantly looking at him like that because she was trying to gauge whether or not he was catching on and trying to probably had a lot of thoughts in her head from whatever happened in the past, which I will get to. And the other doctors probably did not understand why Koboto was constantly going to sleep and was constantly out of it because he was being drugged, apparently. That is why Osanai was telling him to water the flowers because the water had drugs in it and the flowers were dying because the water was killing them. Now it all makes so much sense why Osanai was not coming to see him in person and why she was sending, I guess, gifts or overnight, giving him little pieces of paper with coded messages on them. It turns out the little wolf plushie she gave him actually no, it did not have anything in it. I slightly suspected that it had a listening device about halfway through this episode because Koboto kept talking to it, and I thought, oh yeah, that's something Osanai would do. And Koboto thought that too, but apparently it was the chocolates this whole time. And not only that, there were 2 boxes of chocolates. The chocolates that I was praising so much either the last one or the one before that. It turns out they were way more important than just showing time. In fact, it may have been, at this point, it's been way more than 2 weeks. Because those chocolates did not go fast enough. And I had the thought this episode, I thought, man, it's taking him a long time to eat all of these chocolates. And now it makes sense because there were actually 2 things of chocolates. And Koboto didn't notice because he was being drugged and he was woozy the whole time. It's just everything really just comes together. This is probably, I want to say, the best mystery in the show. I'll have to wait till the conclusion because we still haven't figured out the past yet, even though I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. But it definitely comes together so cleanly, unlike the last one where it was a bit anticlimactic because it was like, okay, this guy who didn't really have any, we didn't know enough about the culprit to actually make a conclusion, and we didn't know enough. It focused too much on the side characters, which is kind of the point of the last arc, was to develop the side characters, but they ended up not really mattering so much. We kind of pushed Osanai and Koboto to the sides until the very end, and I have some thoughts on that, but I'll save that probably for the next recording, where I'll talk about my thoughts on the season as a whole. But in this particular case, everything was focused on laser pinpoint, eye of the needle, whatever you want to say. That's not even an idiom, but who cares? The fact that we get into Koboto's head so much as well is a really good change of pace after the last arc, as I just alluded to. My feelings on that. Even though I really did like the last arc. All right, stop talking about the last arc. This arc. But I think the most impressive thing is how, as you learn more about the past, it keeps, like in the past 2 episodes, we've been spending most of our time in the backstory of this previous hit and run, and this episode we gradually get more of the present as it starts flashing back and forth, and then eventually we stay almost entirely in the present, as when the past case is solved, then the present case is solved, and everything just comes full circle, and it feels very satisfying the way it was all paced. But to actually talk about the case, I think Koboto made a bit of a mistake. I understand now why he wanted to apologize to Hisaka, because at least as the show would have us believe, he told a complete stranger all the intimate details about this hit and run, and that stranger winds up being the criminal. So Koboto just contributed to the criminal almost getting away because he couldn't help but investigate, and he didn't take proper precautions. That being said, well, hold on, let's not get there yet. It also makes, like, in that situation, it makes sense why Hisaka, I'm pretty sure that's his name, would be so mad, because he just almost made things worse, and he let Koboto put Hisaka in big danger because he gave big stranger big information, to put it simply. However, that being said, I don't believe it. I do not believe it, because what is this about what's her name? Eri, I think? Something like that, from nursing. The girl who was walking with Hisaka, and as we found out, is in the present day named Hisaka Eri. So what's the situation here? Why did she have to run away? Why was Hisaka so cautious of her being involved in the case? It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all, that particular angle, unless the man that Koboto met with was actually Hisaka's father, and Hisaka was trying to keep the girl a secret from his father, or at least the fact that he was walking with her or spending time with her a secret. And I think there are 2 distinct possibilities, and it all depends on the present. Either Hisaka Eri was always Hisaka Eri, or Hisaka Eri was someone else Eri before in the past. So either Hisaka married Eri, or Eri was always related to Hisaka. In that case, she would probably be his older sister, because he was in middle school at the time. And I bet that there is some strange relationship between the father and Hisaka, or the father more likely, and Eri, meaning that Eri is either some sort of illegitimate child or someone that his father did not approve of Hisaka getting into a relationship with, which would make his actual girlfriend a cover girlfriend, which would mean that he was not cheating on her because he wasn't actually going out with her, and that is the best case scenario. But because Koboto told the father everything, that would put Hisaka into a really bad position, and even worse, would put Eri into an even more terrible position depending on their family dynamic. That's about all I can gather from right now, but the fact that Eri went so far as to either purposefully or on the spur of the moment hit Koboto with a car means that Koboto really put some stuff into motion that day that did not turn out well. And considering that the rumor is that Hisaka literally committed suicide, yeah, I can see why she might be so mad. However, that being the case, I'm not sure what her end goal was. Did she want to kill him? I don't think so, or at least she doesn't think so, because when I think Osanai confronts her about it at the end of the episode, she seems aghast at the idea that she would murder Koboto in cold blood. But at the same time, she kind of tried to do that with the car, and she really doesn't have much other choice if she doesn't want to be arrested. However, now that Osanai knows, she would have to kill 2 people, so I unfortunately think that the hammer at the end of the episode is not for use on Koboto or Osanai, but for use on herself. And hopefully they can avoid a similar situation as what happened to Hisaka. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole episode. I will say it's very interesting that the last arc ended with Koboto basically realizing how much he cared for Osanai and expressing that to her. And this arc ends with the exact opposite, with Osanai almost losing Koboto, realizing how much he means to her, and her expressing that toward the end. And so it all comes full circle, and there's all going to be a happy ending. and we will see what happens and how everything wraps up in the specifics of the case. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on this episode. I probably forgot a couple things, but it was really a really good case. Everything leading up to the conclusion was really good, and I'm hoping that they don't make it anticlimactic in the next episode, because that scene of them being confronted with the nurse was really well done, and probably the most tense scene aside from when Osanai was kidnapped in the previous season. But even that scene wasn't super tense because we know Osanai put herself in that position. Whereas in this position, they are both completely helpless, because I'm sure, despite how feisty she is, Osanai is not a physical brawler. Although I would not put it past them to have made preparations for this, and they were just caught off guard too soon. All right, anyway, I'm going to stop talking now before I go on further about unrelated things. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. So long.